It's weird to be back. It's been like several months without putting out content, but we are back, folks. Back to Side Note. Welcome, and here with me this afternoon is Alice.KM.
Hey.
I would say DJ, producer, vocalist.
Yeah.
Based on the stuff that I checked out of yours. Awesome. So I'm pretty excited because I feel like I talked to a lot of techno folks. I talked to a lot of tech house folks. But up until this point, I haven't really, sat down with a lot of folks who kind of embody more of that kind of playa vibe, which I think, at least, I don't know if you would characterize your sound as that, but, listening to some of your stuff, I definitely sort of vibe kind of that burner-ish aesthetic. I don't know, how would you?
I have a really hard time describing my own sound, which I think is common for artists.
Right.
But I love deep house. Like that was my first real love in terms of electronic dance music. I have yet to actually go to Burning Man, so I don't know if I can accurately say playa vibes because I haven't.
You don't want to stake your flag there just yet. But okay. But I feel like, so as someone who's been and as someone who's listened to your music, I feel like, even though, I guess, there'd be hesitation because you haven't been, but I just
don't want to misrepresent.
Right. But I would say that, I feel like your sound definitely sort of fits within that realm, which is awesome.
Cool.
I also found so there was one, I think it was the most recent. No, it was the Mr. Brightside that you dropped. You were on the vocals on that, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I was very much getting. Do you remember a band from the early 2000s named Mandalay?
No.
Okay. Well, you should check them out. The lead vocalist is a female vocalist. I remember back in the day, Madonna or something said that they're my favorite band of the moment.
Oh.
But very sort of electronic inspired. I think if you went back now, it might sound a little dated because, it's been a minute. But there was definitely sort of a Mandalay-ish vibe, at least for your Mr. Brightside remix. And beautiful vocals. Good job. Good work.
Thank you.
So you're in town this week from Seattle. Is that where you live?
Tucson.
Okay. Yeah. So you're performing at Pattern Bar. I don't know that this episode is going to make it out before your performance. But we'll figure out, maybe we can push something out on the socials or something to try to get folks to your show.
Oh, thank you. That'd be cool.
And so you're here to perform, and then you're just here to hang in LA.
Yeah.
But you have lived here before, so this is not the first time. Okay. So I guess, tell us a little bit about your process. I guess, a common question that often comes up, when I talk to folks is also just how did you get into music and what was your superhero origin story, so to speak?
Oh man. Well, I started singing as soon as I could talk.
Okay.
Literally. I grew up with a lot of Broadway musical soundtracks. That's kind of what my mom played at the time. So all through schooling up through high school, very much a theater kid, took vocal lessons, did all that. In high school, I became an emo kid. So I was an emo theater kid, if you will.
Okay.
And that's when I always loved music, but I feel that's when I really was latched onto it as something that you could really use to express yourself. And I didn't record anything then, but I started writing lyrics out in journals and whatever, and knew that I wanted to do something with music at that point. Went through college, moved to New York, joined a band for the first time. I played in a couple different bands while I was in New York. I had my own project for a while.
Oh, awesome.
Did
So what was the vibe then? Was it electronic yet, or?
It was kind of goth pop.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we used a drum machine, lots of synths, but still very I'd say more pop informed than actual pop music.
Okay.
And super lyrically and vocal heavy.
Okay.
Played in a couple other dream pop shoegaze projects around the scene. But so while I was recording with my band, we worked with a producer who produced house music. So I started going to his gigs and then fell into like the Brooklyn house scene. I was just like, what is this? I've never heard this before. I'm obsessed. Yeah, and so like maybe it was either like 2016 or 2015, just decided I wanted to try DJing, and haven't looked back.
Okay. So interesting. I feel like that's less common that I've heard in terms of people who found rave because they were kind of doing different kind of music. But that's super cool. I mean, I feel like that speaks to kind of the cross-pollination that happens in big cities and, especially in New York, right? There's so many different sounds and scenes happening that you start you start in one, then you discover something else. I feel like some artists that I feel like maybe had kind of similar trajectory as you, when I think about it, is like, do you know Sophie Tucker?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were Brooklyn based at one point, right? And I think...
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, and I think maybe like the one guy started as like a college basketball player and then like discovered producing or something, while he was injured, and then they had a different kind of band. I don't know. Anyway, so it's not about them, but just to say, New York is like such a special place for that kind of thing to happen.
Totally.
So once you did kind of take on, DJing, like where did it go from there, or producing?
Well, I was just DJing for a couple of years.
Okay.
I definitely a year and a half in, bought Ableton, opened it, was overwhelmed and terrified, and put it away for a while.
Yeah. Has that changed? Because that hasn't changed for me. Yeah, it's Ableton's a little scary,
Oh, fully. And it's learning a whole new language. It wasn't until 2020, I was working with a manager at the time, and she was like, why the fuck are you not producing music? I was like, I don't know how to. And she was like, fucking learn. So she was just super real about it. And she's sent me a couple courses, and then, the pandemic hit. And everyone was doing informational live streams. So I tuned into a ton of producing Twitch streams.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, a lot of artists were talking through their process, and I just took a ton of notes, and then took a couple classes through IO Academy.
Okay.
And then that kind of jump started a year and a half process of just really studying Ableton and learning it. And then I had this 8-month period where I just banged out track after track. And now I would say I actually feel comfortable with Ableton. Although
Awesome.
Every time I talk to someone, it's I learned something I didn't know you could do or whatever. But now, only just 2 years later, I feel I actually know my way around it and can get stuff done fairly quickly.
I feel like that's a pretty quick learning curve, though, for a software that's so complicated. I mean, I'll just read people's socials about oh, there's this plugin and that plugin and this other, and I'm just I have no idea what you're talking about. But kudos to you for having figured it out.
I mean, it is endless.
Yeah.
The amount of plugins that exist, you could spend all your time just acquiring them and trying to play with them. Two of the classes I took through IO were taught by Rinzin.
Oh yeah, I know him. Desert Hearts, right? Desert Hearts Black?
Yeah.
Okay. He's kind of popping off lately, but yeah, go on.
He just released with Factory 93.
Yeah.
Doing crazy stuff. It's awesome. But so the style of music that he makes, I think, is not the same, but similar to, I think, the kind of style that I'm kind of going for. So I took a lot of his recommendations on plugins and a lot of the production chains that he suggested, and they've really worked for me. And I've tweaked things and made changes based on other producers I've studied with, and just kind of accumulating things all together. But his course was really helpful and really gave me a solid template to bounce off of and work with.
So then, you mentioned you were big on music growing up. So did you already know how to play instruments and all of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I studied piano for a couple years, studied music theory, in like middle school through college.
Okay.
Briefly played the clarinet, dropped that really fast, but
Okay, but still, I mean, it sounds like you have a very good foundation, because you hear about those producers who like have no musical background and they're still able to crank music out. Which, since I don't really understand production that well, like you tell me like how helpful is actually knowing music when it comes to all of this sort of technical aspect of managing, a DAW.
I think you can get away with not knowing a lot about theory, and still, if you just figure out how the software works, especially with like Splice and how many samples exist, like you can just piece things together.
Interesting.
And like run with it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so now, what does your process look like in terms of, are you dedicating time every week to like sit down and write or create, or like how does it work for you?
Depends on the week.
Okay.
I do try though. My goal Monday through Friday is the first hour or two that I'm like awake with coffee in hand is when I'm in my DAW working.
Okay.
I found that I do my best and most efficient work first thing in the morning. So that's always my goal. And, sometimes like other projects and like life gets in the way, but, that is what I'm constantly trying to do. And then, I'll take sessions at other times or whatever, but I am trying to spend at least an hour to 2, 5 days a week working on music.
Okay. That's considerable, right? I feel like that takes a lot of discipline to kind of carve that time out. Even for things like normal things that, people do regularly, like working out and stuff, right? If you were dedicating a couple hours a day to like working out, you would be like, or I would be, you as in like the general, you would be like shredded, right?
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, the fact that you can dedicate that same amount of time to like your craft and your artistry, I think it takes a lot of discipline.
And it totally goes in waves, especially like when I'm traveling, like I probably won't work on music for like 3 days this week just because that's how the chips are going to fall. But, and then, I think also mentally how I'm doing plays a factor in that. But yeah, I had a solid couple months where it literally was every morning I was actually in my DAW, and that was really great. I was super productive. I felt like I got so much done. This summer has not been as productive, but my goal is to get back to it for the rest of the year.
And I guess in terms of like the mental aspect to it, to what degree, I guess, does sort of your set and setting impact the music you're making? So is it like a situation where you're feeling blue or something and, like it's coming out in your music, or angry, or et cetera?
I feel like I tend to make the same sort of stylistic choices regardless of like where my mood is at.
Okay.
For me, it's more so like if I'm mentally like not in a good space, I have a hard time creating in the first place. And so I just kind of like get a creative block, and I'm just kind of stuck until I can like get myself out of that rut.
Got it. So, having, I guess, taking a step back, having discovered the music through kind of different scenes in New York, like at what point, if any, did you like start sort of going to raves a lot and kind of checking it out, or like what did that look like in terms of experiencing the music?
Yeah, there was a huge like warehouse scene happening at the time.
Was Output open at that time? Okay.
Oh, went to like Output all the time. Verboten. What were some? I went to a couple like Bang On raves. Some others that I don't even know the name of. Like there was an email list I was on called Bury Me in Brooklyn, and I don't know what the party they threw was, but like they did some really cool underground shit.
Okay.
There was this other party, Resolute, that was like a strictly actors.
That was still there. That existed when I lived there. Like, so yeah, they've been around.
Yeah, and I think they're still going strong.
Okay.
Yeah, so like just found like a ton of options, and these were all happening all the time. So it was really cool. Got to see like a lot of really awesome, I guess, alternative nightlife events. Is that a weird way to put it? And then some like proper like huge production raves. What was the party? I can picture exactly this one party I was at, and I cannot for the life of me remember. I could tell you who was part of the production team, but I can't remember the name of the event.
Okay.
But there was some really, really cool, like high-end production, but still super underground, but like, you know, projection mapping all over the venue and like awesome performance art and like decorative space outside. Like so many cool immersive things happening. And that was like in my first like year and a half of like going to raves. I forget what your initial question was.
Oh yeah, I guess the general gist was, you know, what type of raves and parties were you experiencing in New York, you know, when you first discovered it? Did you ever go to Brooklyn Mirage while you were out there?
Yeah.
Okay. That place
Is
like
wild.
blows my mind every time. I got to go this past July, and they redid the whole thing. So now the screen in the back sort of wraps around the side wall as well. It's sort of one contiguous screen that starts on the side and then wraps down the front.
Wow.
It's like definitely some like 21st century like space shit. You know, I feel like I was like, oh, this is like a rave from a sci-fi movie. Like I feel like I'm in Blade Runner or something. And yeah, it's just mind blowing. You know, next time you're back home, like definitely if you can, like check it out. I mean, I will say like, it seems like the types of events that happen there have become sort of increasingly commercial. You know, there's a lot more just like EDM type shit happening from what I've been told. But, and I didn't know this until like doing some deep Googling, the people who own the Mirage were actually like rave promoters from Switzerland. So they created it specifically to create sort of like, you know, like the mecca for like more underground raving, and that's City Fox. So City Fox, right? They throw parties at the Mirage all the time, and I came to learn they actually own the Mirage, which is fucking awesome. It's like, oh, like this is a crew that actually has like good taste. That's like throwing like amazing events that owns this amazing venue, and I guess, you know, for the economics to work, they have to, you know, rent it out for Zed and, you know, Calvin Harris, but it's still pretty phenomenal.
I recently heard that it's the highest grossing club in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That makes sense. I mean, I would have thought Vegas, but I mean, the Mirage is probably, it can probably pack more than your average Vegas club. And
because they have two like the indoor and outdoor space, right? Because Avant-Gardener's part.
Yeah, the whole thing is is the Avant-Gardener, right? Yeah, the whole
confused.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is the Avant-Gardener, which includes the Mirage, which is like the huge outdoor space, and then there's the King's Hall and maybe like the Queen's Hall, but all told, there's maybe like 4 stages.
It's massive, yeah.
Yeah, and like you know, you went like it's like getting a festival experience in one venue. Mm-hmm. Or the way I describe it to folks here is it's like a world-class venue on par with like the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek or something like that. But that throws parties till 6 a.m, right? Yeah. Which would be unheard of here, right? Like if you could go to a party at the Hollywood Bowl that ended at 6 a.m, you know, people would be like, take my money. But, you know, our city does not sort of allow for that. But in New York, anything goes. Truly. On that point though, I do feel like the city that never sleeps aspect of partying in New York was definitely difficult for me when I lived there, and even more so when I visit, right? Like, it's like people don't show up till like 1 or 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And they party till 5 or 6. I'm like, dude, like, why?
Yeah. Dude, so I remember I was like 23 working my first office job, and I would like leave the office, go to happy hour, get dinner with friends, be out until 3 a.m. on like a Tuesday, because there's so much to do. You could do that any week.
Right.
And then like be back at the office at 9 a.m. the next day. And I have no idea how I did that. Like I could not do that now at 31. Like,
Yeah.
I think I would die.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. I was just at, do you know Mayan Warrior? It's like an art car from Burning Man.
Oh no, I'm not familiar.
It's an art car from Burning Man. They tour the art car around the world, and they came through LA last night. I think they're still here today, actually. Most amazing production. Like, it's one of the most immaculate parties that exists on the planet, I feel like. Albeit like it's a little pricey. Like, the tier 1 tickets start at like 75, and then I was trying to get friends to come yesterday, and they're like, dude, the tickets are like 140 now. So like, it's pretty rough. That said, you know, like, I think if you plan in advance, like you do the tier 1, it's like 100% worth every penny. The point being, that party starts at like 4 and ends at midnight.
Oh wow.
So I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
This is the geriatric, like, these are the geriatric hours that I need, like, in my life today. Like, I don't need to be up until, like, I don't need to see the sunrise anymore. I'm a little bit over that.
Yeah.
You know, once in a while, but I definitely appreciate, you know, and I think in LA, just because I guess maybe our sound ordinances are a little stricter, you know, like if you're doing an outdoor party in a public space, like basically midnight is your cutoff. But I think as a result of that, there's been like this huge sort of, I don't want to say renaissance, because I don't think that it existed before, but it's sort of this new wave of outdoor events that kind of take place within these reasonable LA hours, which I can definitely get behind. You know, that being said, you know, LA has some catching up with New York to do in terms of like having the option to party late.
Yeah.
But I like that our culture is a little more laid back, a little more get to bed early kind of thing.
Yeah.
So while you're here, like what else is on? Like, do you have like parties and stuff that you're hitting up in addition to the one that you're playing?
I'm actually like not sure at all.
Okay.
I, you know, definitely like asked a bunch of friends. I was like, what do you recommend? Like, what's going on this weekend? And there were 2 events last night, Lights Down Low, and then there was like another warehouse, but like they were totally sold out by the time I even looked into maybe going. So I feel a little out of touch with what's happening in LA, and I've only been gone for 2 years, but like I feel like I don't have a concept anymore of like what's what.
Well, that's been 2 years post COVID, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
During
post,
yeah.
to now, where I think we're definitely at a place now where like it feels like the pandemic is truly in the rear view. But that also means things have changed so fast, right? Since the last time you were here. So yeah, you wouldn't be begrudged for sort of not feeling like, you know, like I'm still a regular participant in LA, and I feel like, you know, the scene has changed like so much before my eyes. So you live in Tucson. Tell us about the music scene there.
It's a small city, so it's a small scene. I think part of the problem is because I moved there during the pandemic, like a lot of things that had been happening have not been. What I've been told by people who have been in Tucson for a while is that like the scene has been rebuilding itself over the past year. So like all of the clubs that have been open, it's a big college town. So a lot of the clubs that have been open are really geared like towards college kids and are playing like top 40s, open format. Right. The one spot in town that was like known for house music is reopening this week. So
the one spot,
literally like the one spot.
Shit.
So I am excited to see what that will do for the scene. My partner and I, we throw events as well. And we're in talks of maybe doing like a monthly with them. So hopefully gonna like get involved and see what we can make happen while we're still there.
Okay. So I guess first of all, DJ, producer, vocalist, promoter.
Part-time promoter.
Alice.KM. And I guess number 2, like what is the vibe of like the events that you're trying to do? Is it more like ravey warehouse? Is it kind of deep? Kind of what's the aesthetic?
That's a great question, honestly. So like let me take that a step back. Anything that's like immersive really is like what I'm interested in making happen. You know, because like what I experienced in New York was so many events where like there are vendors, there are interactive things you can do. There's performance art. There's just so much happening all around. Like I love that energy so much. So I want like every party I go to be like that.
More of like the carnival kind of atmosphere.
Yeah. And you know, my partner is a disco DJ and he has like a circus background. So like he also is very much into like the theatrics and making.
Wait. You're going to have to elaborate on circus background.
Like, not a circus performer, but worked at this, like dinner theater / circus in San Francisco for a long time.
Okay.
And is like super theatrical, just very like also on that like immersive wavelength.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like a good match.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to wrap my head around circus. Like, are we talking like trapezes and like lions jumping through hoops, or
more like really like crazy intense like jugglers who are also like running on like barrels like at the same time, like that kind of like stuff. Some aerial performance as well, but I don't know if it's like full blown like trapeze, that kind of vibe.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe we'll have to get him on the show to talk about it, but I digress. So you're talking about sort of creating like immersive events so have you thrown these events in Tucson?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've done a handful. We've done like a disco night because like that's his vibe. I have a party series that I did in Brooklyn for, I don't know how long, but it was a monthly that I did at a couple different venues. And it was like a techno and like deep house kind of party.
Okay.
And so I've done 2 nights of that same like party concept in Tucson as well. And then there was a like house themed night that we did. So we've done a lot of different things. It's just, it's been such like a weird time, you know, with everyone getting comfortable with going back out and, like the scenes rebuilding. And also it's just, like I said, it's such a small market so that it's not as, like there aren't as many people to get out to an event as there would be in LA or New York.
Right.
But the events that we have done have been like super well received. Like people are really into it, and there's not a ton like that happening elsewhere in town.
So I've always wondered, you know, like, so being in a smaller place, so there's less of a market, but there's also probably maybe fewer other artists. So does it sort of balance out in terms of, you know, maybe there's more opportunity to perform and to kind of be in front of folks, or is that like, I don't know.
It's kind of like a tough call. It's hard to say. There are still a ton of DJs in town.
Okay.
But I would say there's only a handful of us that are producing.
Got it.
You know, there's still a handful of promoters doing parties. I think all the promoter groups though have such distinct different sounds that there's kind of, it's like this crew lives over here in these venues and does like a lot of like EDM, dubstep, like that kind of vibe. And then this crew is over here doing more like EDM / top 40s. And then like there's us and like another promoter group somewhere over here trying to do more like house, techno, like bringing other things to the scene. I completely just lost my train of thought.
Got it. So there's still a lot of groups and doing stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of vying for maybe kind of a share of a smaller pie since it's a smaller market.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, so I wanted to bring up, have you been to the Wisdom here in LA?
Not yet.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks so cool.
Yeah, because it sounds like kind of what you're trying to go for in terms of immersive experience that has kind of multiple aspects to it. It sounds like very much something like what they're doing, which if you haven't like looked into it, you know, there's like an interactive museum piece, and then they throw parties, and then there's, you know, the food vendors, and then all the other stuff.
Awesome.
Definitely check it out, you know, while you're here if you can. I think the museum piece Shout out to Wisdom, no affiliation. I think the museum piece may be open daily, and
Cool.
and then on the weekends, they have more sort of immersive experiences in terms of kind of a more carnival like party vibe. And then some, I think on weeknights and stuff, they'll have like the odd like sound bath and that kind of thing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So, as someone who kind of, and I don't want to, mischaracterize your sound, but as someone that sounds to me kind of maybe on the burnery yogic side of things, like, is that something that you're about, or am I sort of misreading that?
Oh no, I mean, like, I'm about it.
Okay.
Like I love that. Like like speaking of like yoga, I DJ'd a yoga class for the first time a couple weeks
sick.
ago. Loved, like, that's been on my bucket list for like 5 years. So like it was super cool. I love the like marriage of like deep house and yoga specifically.
Okay.
Like I think it's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I love all the like deep melodic genres. Recently I've been getting really into breaks though. And like, I find every time I play, the BPM is just going like closer and closer. Like, I used to really stick to like 120 to 125, but now I'm like, I want to start at 127. I want to get up to 132. Like, just like.
No, I 100% concur on the increase in BPMs. It's actually something that I feel like has come up on this show a lot, and I agree, even for myself, as someone who DJs, always used to sort of exist in that 120 to 125. And then the music that's being released, granted, I don't make any of it myself, but the music that I am consuming has gotten steadily faster and faster and faster, to where like I'm routinely seeing shit like in the 145, 147. I'm like, ugh, I don't think I can play this. Or if I do play this, I'm going to have to pitch it down to like maybe a 130, but I 100% agree with you. Also 100% agree that breaks have made like a huge comeback.
Totally.
I feel like it's sort of a different breaks. I feel like, I don't know the kind of stuff that you're encountering, but I'm encountering a lot of this sort of kind of like 90s inspired kind of ravey warehouse sounding breaks. Like a lot of like vocal samples and shit.
So many vocal chops.
Yes. That, or like kind of like that Overmono. Do you know Overmono?
Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Really, really amazing producers. I think it's two guys. But yeah, I think it's like that sort of Overmono, real kind of like chuggy warehousey sound that's coming back. But I love it. I fucking love it. I feel like we've gotten far into the like business techno rabbit hole for far too long.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice like vibe shift.
Yeah, 100%. And it happens. I feel like that's one of the great things about, dance music generally, is that the vibes do shift pretty frequently. And I guess that happens in all genres of music, right? If you listen to like Drake today versus, like Snoop from back in the day, it's definitely different. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know. Electronic music kind of sounds the same all the time, but it also changes a lot, and it's awesome that it can be both those things at once, I guess.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So what kind of artists, are you listening to for inspiration, or who are your favorite kind of DJs and producers?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I hope I'm saying this right, but I love Curion.
Okay.
I really, really love Anjuna Deep. Like,
I was gonna say, like, that's kind of her, like, she's part of that whole crew, right?
Totally. Super love like most stuff that comes out of that label.
Okay.
I've been listening to a lot of Marsh. I opened for Marsh earlier this year.
Holy shit. Congrats.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. When I got that booking email, I was like, like, it was great. But again, Anjuna Deep. Who else? I'm part of the Femme House crew. Like, I'm a resident for Femme House Friday.
Okay. I'm not familiar.
LPGOB and
Okay.
Her Mix-a-Lot
Okay.
co-founded. So I've fallen in love with LPGOB's music over the past year. So kind of, and then that's like a different branch of house, but, incredible. Trying to think, who else have I been listening to? I feel like, do you experience this as a DJ? I feel like I amass so much music and I know songs, but I don't always retain like the artists and like the label and like
100%.
where they're coming from.
Yeah. It's not like, so like back in like the vinyl days, right? You'd buy like a couple a week and everyone would sort of know their collection. But now with digital, yeah, like the volume of music that, you know, one is managing is so tremendous. It's so hard to like remember names and stuff. So yeah, 100%. But LB or LPGOB? I know I've
LP.
seen the name, but I'm not familiar. Okay. And that's sort of in the same vein of kind of the like melodic house.
I'd say like closer to Sophie Tucker in style.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Like very like vocal heavy piano house.
Okay.
But like, you know, total like festival, big stage vibes.
Right.
Yeah.
So looking back, like in terms of like, and I know this is probably a tough question, but like what are some of the shows that have like stood out for you as far as like a consumer, like having experienced it?
So earlier this year I saw LPGOB on the Femme House tour and it was absolutely incredible. Like granted, it was probably the first like big electronic show I'd been to since the pandemic hit. So there was an extra layer of like, this is amazing. It's back, you know? So that was an incredible show. I'm trying to think. So I used to be probably actually the first electronic act, and I wouldn't even describe them as dance music. They're more like future pop, but Purity Ring.
Okay.
I saw them live a couple times and each show was like incredible, made a really big impact. And that was one of the first artists I started listening to when I shifted from like, I very much like was an emo kid who was like, if there's no guitars in it, it's not real music, you know, like that was one of the first artists that I was like, oh, there's no guitars and this is incredible. Like, so I think they had a really big impact also.
Awesome. And to that point, I feel like one of my like crowning achievements in life, or one of my favorite things to do, is to like try to convert people who are like anti electronic music. Anytime I hear someone say like, oh, it's not real music, I'm like, okay,
let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Take one of these and then like we'll go to the show and we'll see what you have to say afterward. The show does not condone anything illegal.
I've recently, like in the past year, there's someone, I don't want to give too much. I don't want it to sound like I'm, sorry, let me think of how I want to word this. I recently have had multiple conversations with the same person who is always kind of like coming at me, trying to get me to admit that like music produced by a single person on a computer is inferior to music made by even just some like group, like a group of 3 people just like playing live instruments.
Right.
And it always makes me feel really like weird and like almost like being like stuck between like a rock and a hard place, because like it's apples and oranges. You can't actually like compare them. And I think it's incredible that one person can sit at their computer and like produce an entire full sounding track and have it be like a total banger and like super like just like an incredible song.
Yeah.
You know, and definitely having more people on a track, especially like when everyone is like really good at what they do, only elevates it. But I find this like mentality that like if there's not like a real like hand to instrument making a sound happen, that it somehow isn't respected. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I fight against that notion. Like I disagree with that notion entirely. Right. And I agree. It is apples and oranges. I mean, and also like, look, it's like, it depends what you're looking at. Right. Like, I feel like comparing, you know, Zed or something, to the Beatles, sure. But you know, the gamut of music within electronic is so broad that, I mean, there's some clear genius stuff out there that, like, I feel like is undisputable, right? Like, I mean, for me, like if you take like, you know, a Chemical Brothers, like any album from the Chemical Brothers, I think is absolutely like just genius. And yeah, for someone to sit there and tell me like that's sort of less valid artistically than something else just because there's analog instrumentation and the other thing is just bullshit. And I think a lot of that is just rooted in sort of an older school mentality, because I don't know that a lot of, you know, so we're both in our 30s. I don't know that a lot of people kind of in their 20s, like kind of the Zoomers, would agree with that at all, right? Because they've been brought up 100% on digital and social media, and it's, you know, it's just a full sort of upbringing in a digital space. Whereas, you know, I'm sure you and I can both remember like a time sort of before the internet, right?
Yeah.
So for the next generation of folks, I don't know if they will share that sentiment.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah, and to anyone who does, you know, say that, I would say, you know, you're just old and irrelevant. I mean, I don't mean to be harsh, but, you know,
It's definitely like hanging on to of like a different way of things happening.
yeah. So one of my ex-girlfriends, like one of the more meaningful relationships in my life, and we're still very good friends. But one of my like sort of crowning achievements was when we first met. You know, she was very much like into kind of like that grunge, you know, that was the stuff that she was brought up in, like Nirvana, and Nine Inch Nails and stuff. And when we first met, you know, I was like, oh, I'm really big in electronic music. Like, I'm going to take you to stuff. And she totally pulled the like saying like, it's not real music. It's bullshit. And then cut to like, we were together like, I think almost 5 years. And by the end of it, she's like, I can't even listen to that old shit anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. She's like, I'll put on, you know, a Soundgarden or whatever. And she's like, it's still good, but she's like, yeah, it just makes me feel weird. And the music clearly sounds dated. Right. And now she's like all about like Ellen Alien and like crazy, like 140 BPM, like Berlin techno is like where it's at for her. And I was like, yes, yes. One of like my life's crowning achievements. And yeah, anyone I can help do that for, although, you know, like you've probably seen those memes too online, right? Where like, being a DJ just means like eternal despair. And I feel like there's like a lot of sentiment on the internet that being an electronic music fan, and particularly a DJ or a producer in the scene, means like a life of feeling disappointed and marginalized. I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
But have you seen stuff like that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like half of my Twitter feed is just like shitting on DJs.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just like, how? Because like I feel like everyone I follow is also a musician. I'm like, wait, how did we get here where all we do is like shit on our own craft? Like,
yeah, we've gotten to a strange place where it's like we all love the music and we would all like passionately defend it, and then yet we're all just like constantly hating on each other and the scene. And again, not like, you know, but I think as a collective, it is kind of a strange place that we've arrived in. Like the most recent meme I saw that I can remember was a picture of like at a pharmacy, a sign that was supposed to say like external pain, like, you know, here's the meds for external pain. And the X had been taken out. So it says eternal pain. And the caption was like, life as a DJ.
okay.
Yeah, or maybe it was like life as a bedroom DJ. There's also a lot of shitting on bedroom DJs, which I understand from the standpoint of a lot of bedroom DJs are very like critical when they go out to shows. So I understand sort of, you know, turning it back on them. But also there's this idea of like, oh, like you're not as good as, you know, you're not real because you don't play out a lot. Where I feel like musicianship has little to do with playing out. I feel like it's different skill sets, right? Like, I don't know, you tell me, but like from talking to folks, you know, I feel like the feedback that I have gotten is that, like going out and gigging and like building a career as someone who performs is much more a function of going out and networking and like, you know, being known versus anything to do with your music?
Partially.
Or
I think
yeah.
partially. It's tough because, like, I mean, you know, just a thought that I had when you were talking about bedroom DJs, like, it is totally possible to be a killer DJ who has no idea how to produce music, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so I think in that regard, you can totally like separate them as different functions. I don't know though. So like, definitely, I personally have found that networking is a big part of getting DJ gigs. I have found though that in the past year, I do think some of the gigs I've only gotten because of the music I released.
Okay.
Like I do think there's been an element of like, you know, so like one of my singles I released on a compilation on I Am Her Records under hers record label.
Okay.
And definitely like, you know, a couple people were like, oh, you're part of like I Am Her, like, okay, cool. So like, you know, I think like that in particular, I think was a big part of helping me get booked to open for Marsh.
Got it.
And, you know, a few things like that. So I don't, you know, it's so nuanced.
Yeah. And I think that's a totally fair point. And I agree. Like, I think being like producing music is very much sort of a key piece now. If you want to be like, even if you just want to be a DJ, right, you have to produce and you have to release music. Mm-hmm. But I think like in terms of, I guess, because music is so subjective, right? We're no longer at a place where like you can just judge each other by like the mix that we put on Mixcloud, and it's not solely about that anymore. Whereas I think maybe back in the day it was just like people would hand around, you know, mix CDs and people would listen and be like, oh, your mix is good, your mix is bad, or etc. And now it's maybe a little more multifactorial where, you know, you need to produce, you also need to be a good networker. There's so many aspects to it. You know, I think one of which is relatively new is like socials, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, what is, because actually I ask everyone who kind of comes through, you know, what their view is. Obviously, I think the consensus is that it's important. But I think there's varying opinions about, you know, should it be as important as it is, and varying opinions about whether or not people enjoy having to do it. Mm-hmm. What is your take?
So like my freelance hustle is in social media.
Okay.
So I very much have a social media like marketing manager like lens on this.
Okay.
Where like it's super important, you know, like your social following has become like almost like a form of currency with
100%,
you know, with your value to another entity. But on the creator side of it, it like makes me absolutely crazy because like the last thing I want to do is think about like, what kind of reel can I make to get good engagement to like, you know, break through this like totally fucked up algorithm that we now have.
Yeah.
So it like, I like and it's funny because like I can like work with clients and I can tell them like, make this exact type of thing, do this, these like, I had a client who I told them, I was like, replicate this TikTok, and it totally like got over 5 million views. Like
what do you mean like replicate? Like how just make it the same way in the same manner that this other TikTok was produced, or?
So I had them take the sound. And so I was like, use this audio, record your own video to it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And so like, you know, they changed the setting and like what they were doing in the video, but they used the same audio. And this was also like in 2020. So it's kind of, I think TikTok has changed since then a lot, but,
oh, even in just like 2 years.
Oh
okay.
Yeah, I think so. Like it's weird. Like I think you used to be able to get away with like making your own version of the same video without people thinking too much about it. But now I think people are like, that's not original. Even if you're using like a trending sound, they're like, why are you making the same video that someone else just made? So the landscape has shifted a little bit. But you know, like I have been able to like help others, you know, follow trends and do things that totally like took off and worked for them. And then I look at my own page and I'm like, oh, what do I do? You know, like, I think it's always easier having someone from like a third party, like help you.
Okay. That's really interesting to hear, right? From someone who does this for a living. Because, you know, I encounter the same issue, and I've talked about it here, you know, with this project. It's obviously very much a passion project, and I'm not that invested in sort of growing the following and monetizing, right? But obviously it's something I think about, and I'm always just completely perplexed when I'm like, dude, what am I supposed to be posting? Like what, like, you know, like I see other people doing it, and it's things seem to be clicking for them, not just in terms of, oh, they're gaining more followers, but it's like, oh, they're doing something specific. There's definitely sort of like a vibe or a narrative to the type of stuff that they're putting out. And there seems to be a uniform story, like kind of they've created a brand story for themselves. Right. And they're adhering to it. And, you know, when I think about it for this project, I'm always routinely just like, the fuck? No idea.
Yeah.
So what is your approach? I mean, cause you're talking about it is difficult. It's more difficult to do for yourself than it is for another person. But when as you are doing it for yourself, you know, what kind of things do you think about, and what kind of things are you posting about? Like what informs your content?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've noticed like over time, like the more, like, it's weird. I feel like anything that's just kind of like, oh, this like random life thing I did, like if I put it on my feed, no one gives a shit. If I put it in my stories, it does well.
Interesting.
So I've shifted into like only talking about music and like what I have going on, like on my, like in my feed posts. But even recently over the past year, like anything I post that's even semi-promotional, reach gets tanked. Like no one sees it. And then especially in the past 3 months since they've shifted to really focusing about reels, like if you're not posting video content, it doesn't perform well. It's like, it's this constant battle. And I feel like I've had a hard time figuring out what works because the algorithm has changed so many times, even in the past 12 months.
Right. And they don't tell you when it changes, right? So how do you even know that it's different?
There are like updates that are released, if that makes sense. Like if you're kind of tuned into like marketing news, like.
So they do tell you like, somewhat. Okay.
Sort of. They'll tell you what their focus is on, but they won't give any like, you know, there's no like actual like detailed data about the algorithm. It's just like, we're pushing reels right now and nothing else. But then like this report just came out kind of recently that like reels aren't even performing for any creators. So it's like, why is this the focus if no one is seeing success with this? So it's this like double-edged sword where like, you know, I don't want to pour all my time into creating reels because reels are not performing, but at the same time, nothing is performing. So it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, that's such an interesting catch-22. I mean, very interesting what you're saying about how posts are no longer promotional. It's just like, oh, like personal. That's very interesting insight. And then between stories and reels, I'm always like, which is the one that you're supposed to be doing now? Because obviously reels is competing with TikTok, but are people going to Instagram for that same experience that they have that you get on TikTok of just like scrolling through video after video after video? I don't know.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And then I'd be curious to know, you know, to what degree reels convert to followers. Cause I don't know, like in the early days, it was, I mean, there weren't so many things, right? So it was just like people were posting on their feed and that's what was generating their followers. Mm-hmm. And then you introduce stories, and stories, I don't know, to me, it seems like it makes sense. And even though it, you know, is a blatant grab from Snap, it made sense in terms of the way it, you know, the stories are ephemeral. It's for more whatever stuff. And the posts are more sort of memorialized and kind of there, you know, they can forever be referenced. Mm-hmm. But when you introduce reels, then it's just like, well, I don't get it.
It's like a totally like siloed section of the app almost.
So when you do stuff, or you're doing all three, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how do you decide, okay, this is going to be a reel versus this is going to be a story?
I do like share all feed posts to stories. So it's more like am I going to dedicate like the limited space and reach that my feed has like to this piece of content? So I'm trying to use that mostly for like show announcements, show reminders, release announcements, like stuff like that, or like performance recaps, anything kind of like that. And then like when I have the energy, I will try and make like, I've only done a handful of these, but kind of like not quite tutorial, but informational. Like, this is what I did in my DAW to make this track, type of reels. And those have done well, but those take a lot of effort and time.
Okay. Yeah, I see like Rinzin does a lot of those where he's like, oh, this is what I was doing. I have no idea, but I'm interested. Yeah, go on. But so yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense to me. And then but you said you are kind of still just doing like, here I am at wherever, like I'm on a vacation somewhere. Like here's a photo of a beach that I'm at. Like that
would just be in stories. Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't put that on my feed.
Got it. That's like the ephemeral stories.
Yeah.
It's in and it's out. Yeah. I'd be like, I wonder if, Instagram feels like it has the stranglehold right now. Even though TikTok is like still a big thing. I don't know. And maybe it's generational. Maybe the kids are only using Talk and cause we're in our 30s, right? Like we're still on the millennial tip. I don't know. It's so hard to navigate, right? Talk about things changing so quickly in 2 years. It's just like, it's constant. What are things, like, I wonder like, what are things going to look like 10, 20 years from now that like, I won't be able to wrap my head around, like,
oh God.
Right. Cause you think about like our parents, right? And you tell them about like TikTok or some shit and they're like, wait, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wait, it's a platform, especially when it first started, right? Oh, it's a platform for teenagers to post videos of themselves dancing to the same audio loop. And it's endless. It's like, wait, what?
Or to hear a girl telling the craziest story you've ever heard while she's putting her makeup on. Like,
yeah. So I wonder what the equivalent of that is going to be like, for our generation, like when we get old.
There will be something.
I'm sure it'll be something. Yeah. Like some brain injection or something like that. Okay. So like, I guess what's on your, docket for after Pattern Bar? Like, what do you have going for, the foreseeable future in terms of gigs and throwing events, et cetera?
I've got a couple shows in Tucson over November and December.
Okay.
I had a really solid string the last like couple of weeks. I've just been like going. So I finally have a little bit of a break, which is good. But I have like sending out like a lot of like booking pitch emails, trying to get some stuff on the calendar for 2023. I'm more so like getting through a busy show season and getting back into like a planning phase. Got it. Yeah.
So then, so you spend a lot of time kind of like, what do those pitch emails look like when you're sort of pitching shows or, reaching out to folks?
I send like my EPK of my like Spotify stats, notable artists I've opened for, festivals I've played.
Okay. So there's a lot of metrics that you, okay.
Yeah, a lot of stuff like that, especially like if it's a cold outreach and someone I haven't worked with before. I'm really just like being like, hey, like this is who I am. This is what I've done. Would love to chat about, making something happen with you.
That's super interesting though, right? Because now that we're in, obviously like it's been this way for a minute, but interesting to note that there's now stats, like artists now have stats and metrics that they can use, which is not how it was before, right? Like I feel like early on you would have A&R people at labels.
Yeah.
They would just go around to random shows and be like, oh, I think they can sell. Yeah. And it would just be like a bet, right? That some gatekeeper is making on a person and, hopefully it would work out. But now, as an independent creator, even as an independent creator with no sort of corporate backing, like you're generating stats and data and content that can be leveraged to sort of, market yourself, which is, both empowering and daunting, right, at the same time,
Totally.
right? Because, you know, it's a whole new, like now more than ever, as an artist, you really do have to have sort of business savvy.
You have to wear so many hats.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas I think like in the olden days, if you were an artist, that's kind of, you were just partying and arting, right? And then the gatekeepers would come and they'd be like, okay, we're managing you now, and like we're gonna take care of all of that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different beast. As you know, much is like that's just life, right? Well, anyway, looks like, you know, we're coming up on time. You know, just want to make sure people get a chance to follow you. So, you know, please plug your socials and, you know, your events.
Oh, totally. So I'm Alice.KM on all social platforms. Sometimes there's a hyphen at the end, depending on the network, but always Alice.KM. What?
Okay, so you have Pattern Bar coming up this Tuesday.
Yes, thank you.
November 2nd?
Yeah.
Okay, but
Oh, no, November 1st.
November 1st, but by the time this airs, it will have been passed. But people can follow you on Alice.KM, you said, on
Yeah.
Instagram. Okay. And then SoundCloud. I mean, I will have it all posted in the links anyway, but I just want to make sure, you know, we shout you out.
Thank you.
Also, what does the KM stand for?
Oh, so Alice is my middle name.
Okay.
And K and M are my first and last initials.
Got it. Okay. So it's just like your name rearranged.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, folks, check out Alice.KM. If you're ever in the Tucson area, check out her immersive experiences, especially if, you know, you're more into that melodic kind of deep vibe, which I'm so excited to be able to promote here. Awesome, folks. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you when the next episode after this comes out. No idea. Not going to make any promises on the weekly release anymore. So you guys are just going to have to, you know, wait with bated breath and see what we do. Maybe we're like the McRib and it's just a seasonal thing.
Ooh.
Anyway, thanks again. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And yeah, see you guys next time, whenever that is.